Welcome to the Health Science Podcast, sponsored by the National Health Association. I'm your host, Dr. Frank Sabatino, and I'm delighted to have as my guest today, Maya Acosta and Dr. Riz Bukhari. Maya runs the Healthy Lifestyle Solution podcast. She has a passion for really turning people on to this vegan lifestyle, and we're going to talk a lot about her passion for food and how she does that. And Dr. Bukhari is a board-certified vascular surgeon who medically deals with all kinds of vascular blockage diseases, but he has over a number of years integrated more of this plant-based lifestyle and education for his patients and the care that he provides to help people prevent and reverse chronic diseases. Welcome to both of you. Hi. Welcome to the Health Science Podcast, brought to you by the National Health Association, the oldest organization in the world championing the extraordinary benefits of a whole plant food diet and healthy lifestyle, as well as water-only fasting. We believe that health results from healthful living and focus on evidence-based science that promotes the health of you and your loved ones, as well as the health of all animals and the environment. We feature experts from a cross-section of disciplines within the plant nutrition, vegan, psychological, environmental, and animal compassion sectors. I'm your host, Dr. Frank Sabatino, the NHA's Director of Health Education.
Well, thank you, Dr. Frank. Appreciate it.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. You know, it's one of the real perks of doing this for me is getting to meet people that I didn't know who are doing great work and all part of this wonderful vegan family. So I'm so happy to meet you guys.
Thank you. We know you and admire your work. So, it means a lot to us to have been invited.
Well, we're going to
Thank
get
you.
into all of that. But first, everybody likes a vegan love story. How did you guys meet?
Well, wait a minute. It wasn't a vegan love story. It
No,
was
I know. I had a feeling.
I
I had a
know.
feeling it was
But
pre that, but it's okay.
it was a sailing love story.
Yeah.
I later on in life I wanted to pick up sailing, and I'm a little bit of a cheapskate, so I went on to Groupon to try to find the cheapest sailing course available, like on the coast, and it was either Florida or Southern California. But the Groupon, and I prefer Florida, but the Groupon was for Southern California, so I went there, and that's where I met her in San Diego.
He
You
took
met in
me
California,
away.
but you guys lived in Texas for a long time, right?
I've
Well,
been in Texas all my life. Yeah.
Okay.
exactly. So I was living in San Diego. I'm here in Dallas now. So Dallas is my home. But both of us are still yearning to either return to the East Coast or the West Coast
Uh-huh.
to spend time on the sailboat. So,
Yeah. So we learned, I learned in San Diego, but I keep a sailboat in Florida.
mhm.
So
Well,
that's,
yeah, I'm a Florida guy, and I live less than a mile from the ocean. I kind of like that quite a bit, so. But
yeah.
I have a San Antonio connection. I lived in Texas for almost 2 years.
Oh, yeah.
I did research at the Health Science Center in San Antonio. I was involved in the early studies on calorie restriction and aging back in the late 80s and early 90s. So I
Oh,
love that part of Texas. It was great.
yeah. We love San Antonio. I mean, Texas has, the cities in Texas have a tremendous amount of culture, and we love traveling around Texas.
Well, I'm
And
going to
by
ask
the
you
way,
that.
we do
Yeah,
consider, I'm sorry to interrupt you. We do consider Florida like our second home. We try to get there as often as possible because our sailboat, like we've mentioned, is there. So we miss it though. We haven't been there in quite a while now.
It's been a few months.
well,
Yes.
Yep.
I'm sure you'll find your way back there. Well, I'm going to ask both of you this, but I'll start with you, Maya. I know that I know where you guys are now, and in looking at an interview that I saw with you, Maya, you talked a little bit about your early beginnings related to your evolution into this way of living, this way and eating this way. And I'd like to share that a little bit with the audience. I know that you started out in younger years, and you talk about this concept of healing your relationship with food.
Mhm.
Talk a little bit about that if you can.
Yeah. Wow. It's been quite a journey. My family, we were a young immigrant family from Mexico, relocated to the States, and suddenly we had access to all sorts of food. And it became almost like a buffet every evening. And during that time, I might have been like maybe 6 or 7 years old when we came to the States. I started to see a lot of weight issues in my family, and I became obsessed with the idea of, the fear of gaining weight. And I that topic is very sensitive to me in the sense that we're living in times when people struggle with weight, and
Right.
I both don't want to encourage shaming. Because I've come from that world where there are a lot of health issues still in my family, but um, I had disordered eating when I was younger, and it was a way that I also used to numb myself, both because I had a lot of trauma growing up and also because I feared food. And I knew it. People used to call me skinny, bony, use these terms. I was always underweight. So when I went to college, which was interesting. 'Cause my major was psychology, so I think I was in the path of wanting to just to heal something within. I decided to take a nutrition course to see how I could gain weight in a healthy manner. And during that time when I was in college, I saw a video that shocked me and changed how I, consumed certain products. And one of them was I just could no longer eat beef or pork, as a result of what I watched. It just turned my stomach. It was very graphic. And then, of course, I also grew up in a very traditional home where I saw just body parts, I don't want to be very graphic, but I saw what our family ate, and I just somehow probably intuitively knew that this was not supposed to be the way that we were supposed to be eating. And so I made that significant change and I started to slowly eat food without fearing it. So I ate a lot of vegetables, a lot of salads, a lot of fruit. So I was mainly like a pescatarian because I still ate fish. And so, yeah, I'll stop there for now.
But when you have that kind of mindset like you did, with the fear that came into being because of seeing the weight issues in your own family, I appreciate that transformation in terms of the food. Did that? How did you heal? Let's talk about how did you heal the mindset associated with that? Because when you have that kind of issues with food, there's not only a food issue. Obviously, there's other emotional pieces and there's other pieces to that. Was that a slow process over time for you to kind of get that part of it together for yourself?
Right. That's a really good question. And I never thought about that in terms of how I healed it. But I will tell you that I started because my major was psychology and I wanted to move on. At some point, I really wanted to do clinical work. It was understanding the human condition, the psychology of why we are the way we are, and all that has always intrigued me. So I started very early on getting therapy. I became very open to the idea that it's time to heal my emotions. Until this day, I still actually have a coach that I work with. But there was so much happening within me. So while some people eat for comfort, I would starve. I would starve to numb the pain.
Hmm.
And so now that as you asked me that question, I do see that there was a correlation between, how I started to allow some of the pain and the anguish and anxiety as it lifted. I never ate for comfort until this day. When I stress, I don't eat. It's a I don't know how you would say it, but I that's my default. While other people eat for comfort, I don't.
Well,
Um,
that's really interesting because when you look, I grew up in an Italian household. When you grow up in ethnic households, the truth is you're typically eating for comfort. So the fact that it's kind of like from the first breath you take, and that's how you deal with stress and events that are overwhelming. So it's kind of intriguing that you went the other direction with that, which is pretty amazing in itself. And I got the impression from when I heard you speak that it was a health issue related to your own thyroid and some of that, where you then made the step and the move away from even the pescatarian approach into more of a full vegan approach because of mercury toxicity and some of that happened through that time. So was that part of the impetus to kind of make the final step?
yes, and it all happened before we even learned about the whole food plant-based lifestyle. I had not quite met my husband when I started to have all these health problems. And if I can back up just a little bit to explain that, I've always been, for many, many years, I've been interested in the holistic approaches. So, what I put on my hair, what I put on my skin, all of that mattered to me. I try not to have chemicals in the house. Like, there are so many things I had already thought I had cleaned up my life, but Dr. Sabatino, the food was the last thing. I don't know why. That should have been like, I don't know why I didn't come to this information. And so I remember when I said that I feared gaining weight, I started to see myself gain weight. When I was in my mid 30s, I felt like I was over 50 years old. I felt exhausted all the time. I had to nap. I had adrenal fatigue. I had a lot of issues. And it's like anything else. Most of your doctors can't figure out what's wrong. And so I was living in California. I went to my biological dentist after I heard about the relationship between mercury poisoning and hypothyroidism. And I had old amalgams from many years ago, the fillings that still had mercury in them. And my biological dentist is very educated in nutrition, and she asked me about my diet, and then she asked me if I had ever been tested for mercury. And that's when we discovered that I had high levels of mercury, both organic and inorganic. And a lot of it was really related to the fact that I mainly ate seafood. That was it, fish. In general, because I wouldn't touch other meat. I couldn't even really enjoy chicken. That was very hard for me to eat. And I had put on so much weight at that time as a result of that. And my endocrinologist at the time also didn't know how to treat me and started throwing all sorts of medication at me. And I must have gained around that time is when I was already with Riz. I must have gained like 30 pounds in like 30 days from water retention and everything else that the medication was causing. It was a horrible experience. So here, suddenly I'm living with something that I had feared for so long. But for some reason, probably maybe because I had done some of the internal work, I I could get through it. And Riz then kind of took over and helped me manage that and got off some of the medication. And around that time, we became plant-based, and my body just began to heal as a result of the changes that I made.
So Riz, Maya kind of addressed that just a second, but you were practicing in a very sophisticated field in the sense that there's a very remarkable skill set that you have dealing with these vascular blockage diseases, and I saw that it focuses on really helping people prevent amputations and rescuing limbs, and I mean it's really incredible work that you do, and I know that's an incredible skill set. So was that the impetus? I just was curious to see how, in the midst of that, what was the aha moment or the turning points for you to embrace this way of living and thinking?
Yeah, I enjoy what I do. It's a technical skill where I can intervene in someone's life and make a big difference, whether it's saving a limb or preventing a stroke or, treating an aneurysm so they don't have a ruptured aneurysm. And so it is very satisfying. But something I noticed, 15 years into my practice is that my patients kept coming back. I call them repeat offenders, so to speak, and they weren't really getting healthier or better. I was making an intervention, kind of a plumbing intervention, where I fixed something, but they were still getting sick. They were still getting sick elsewhere. They were getting other blockages elsewhere, and so there was a little bit of dissatisfaction personally in the sense that I wasn't, I might be fixing one particular problem. I called it plugging holes and putting out fires. But the real underlying cause or problem wasn't going away. And around that time, I'll credit Maya for what she did. The funny thing is, we moved into an apartment building that was right next to a Whole Foods, and this isn't a plug for Whole Foods, but we thought it was a place where we could live close to somewhere where we could get healthy foods and live a healthy lifestyle. And she said, "Hey, there's a guy named Rip Esselstyn who's going to talk." And I had no idea who he was. This was about 7 years ago. And she said, "He's a fireman, and he's going to talk about cardiovascular disease." And so I was even more put off by that. And so she kind of dragged me to see it. And it was an interesting talk that he gave, and he challenged some of my belief sets about cardiovascular disease and atherosclerosis. He said something like, well, you can prevent atherosclerosis, and you can even reverse atherosclerosis, which, me being considering myself an expert in the field, I hadn't even heard those concepts before. I thought, well, if I'm an expert, I'm board certified in this, and I practice this every day, why wouldn't I know about this? Why wouldn't somebody have taught me about it? Why wouldn't I be reading it in the journals? So I did. I heard what he had to say, but I was a bit skeptical. But maybe my mind was open and ready. Maybe because of just kind of my dissatisfaction with the quote repeat offenders. So I did some more research. I started looking into some of the literature, the China study, how to prevent and reverse heart disease by uh, his father, and I started to find a body of scientific knowledge that supported some of that stuff, and it was quite shocking to me in that there was evidence-based medicine, there was scientific data about something that me as a vascular specialist, the guy who treats atherosclerosis, had never been taught. And there was an evolution from that point where I began to read more and learn more. I incorporated that into my lifestyle, as far as plant-based nutrition, whole food plant-based nutrition, and then I took it a step further, being that if this is what I believe, then I started teaching it to my patients. And then the next part of the evolution is that Maya and I formed our local organization, Plant-Based DFW, where we could try to spread the word beyond just our patients. So that's kind of the aha moment, I guess, would be that exposure initially to something that I had never heard of or didn't even know about.
Yeah, I want to come back to that. But we're going to take just a few seconds of a break to hear from our sponsor, the National Health Association. I'm here with Maya Acosta, Dr. Riz Bukhari, and we're going to come back and delve more into this subject. And now, to put a smile on the sponsors of the National Health Association, you're listening to the Health Science Podcast Show. I want to remind you to visit the National Health Association website, where you'll find incredible resources to support your healthy lifestyle, including plant-exclusive eating without added salt, oil, and sugar. Simply go to healthscience.org or nationalhealthassociation.org. Be sure to check out membership, which is $35 per year for those living within the U.S. and $55 for those living outside the U.S. You'll be amazed at all the information and benefits you'll receive. As a member, you're kept up to date on the latest evidence-based tools for health promotion. You'll receive the incomparable quarterly magazine, Health Science, a beautiful 40-page advertising-free publication mailed to your home or offices, loaded with articles, recipes, inspirational stories, and interviews with world leaders in the fields of personal health, plant-based nutrition, water-only fasting, animal rights, and environmental support. And you'll receive details about life-changing events, such as the 2023 NHA Conference set for June 23 to the 25th, 2023 in Cleveland, Ohio, which will be the NHA's 75th annual NHA Conference. I'm your host, Dr. Frank Sabatino, and now back to the show. Welcome back to the Health Science Podcast. I'm here with Maya Acosta and Dr. Riz Bukhari. It goes back to that famous quote. I don't know, do you know Kim Williams, Dr. Williams? Do you know him?
Of course, yeah.
And I love his quote, as a cardiologist, there's only two kinds of cardiologists, plant-based cardiologists and ones that don't know the literature.
That's right. Yeah.
And so I want to ask you about that, because you deal at such a level with vascular blockage disease. And now from the literature and from the research that has been done that this can also be reversed as well as halted. How does that play when you're dealing with the kind of patients that you deal with? Are they already too much at an endpoint for you to even involve them in some kind of program that could help reverse it? Or do you do that? Do you actually get involved in a reversal program before you do any kind of intervention?
So yeah, you did hit the ball on the head, which is that my patients, by the time they reach me,
Right.
have really advanced disease. They already have gangrene or osteomyelitis, which is infection in the bone. They've already had strokes, or so they've got very advanced problems where we don't really have the time to quote, reverse disease. And so
Right.
they do need interventions, limb saving interventions or life saving interventions. But at the same time, I do believe that teaching them how to live a better lifestyle can do a couple of things. Number one is that it can make them better candidates for the operations that I'm going to do. That's just a no-brainer in that if they live a healthier lifestyle by the time I operate, they have less risk when they operate. And my patients are very high risk patients. They all have hypertension, diabetes,
Right.
hypercholesterolemia. They all have renal disease. And so anything they can do to make themselves healthier before the operation decreases the risk of their operation. It also improves the outcomes of their operations. So that's an important thing, in my opinion. And then I think modifying their lifestyles can reduce their opportunities for ending back up on my table. And that's what I tell them. In a sense, I'm kind of trying to put myself out of business. And I really wish I could. The reality is that that's not really the case. But I do teach all of my patients about this. From the minute that from their first evaluation, they're taught about lifestyle changes. They're taught about nutrition, and they grasp onto it in varying degrees. So
Yeah, I was going to
that's
ask you how the compliance was. So you find that that's quite variable, really.
it is very variable. Now, obviously, the patient population I treat is a relatively non-compliant population, and also there's just so many uh, factors that play into why who we are and what we do. I always quote this. I always say, if just knowing the right thing to do was all we needed to do the right thing, everybody would do the right thing.
That's right.
And so there are so many factors that play into it. It's cultural, it's social, it's psychological. There's what we're exposed to every day as far as advertising, the way we were raised, what our parents taught us. When we go out to dinner with our friends, kind of the pressure we get from them. There are just so many factors that play into it that it's not just such a simple thing as telling them about it.
Right.
And so
Yeah,
it's
those are old patterns that are quite ingrained in many
yeah.
people over a long period of time.
Absolutely. I mean, my patients are usually 50, 60, 70 years old. So we're talking
Right.
about decades of, if you want to call it decades of indoctrination of a certain way of living. And so it really takes some work to get through to them.
Maya, I want to address this with you. You know, you're a nice Mexican girl. I'm a nice Italian guy from the Bronx. You know, we're gonna have to talk about food, right? So when we talk about food, I liked what I was listening to you because for the longest time, I have this sense that when you look at many ethnic cultures across the world, they have their indigenous ways of eating that are very much in line with the kinds of things that we're trying to teach. And I think people lose sight of that. And I know you've had a focus on ethnic food. And I like your concept where you talk about decolonializing the diet, really taking out those influences of invaders that have modified the indigenous diets of populations, whether it's Mexicans, Italians, people in China, Asia, whatever. So, talk a little bit about that process and how you turn people on to that way of thinking. And it's a great way of thinking to make them realize that they don't have to reinvent the wheel. These
Yeah.
cultures have done this over centuries. And by getting back to what they've done, we can take advantage of some very powerful, transformative ways of eating. Can you address that?
Right. Yes. It's interesting. When I was younger, I remember hearing about the I don't even wanna say the restaurant, but I will. I remember hearing about Taco Bell and thinking to myself, "Well, this is not Mexican food. That's not the food that I was introduced to." I still have a lot of family in Mexico, and the food is very different. And then I moved to Texas, and I saw what the Tex-Mex food is, and there's no shame in what I'm saying, in I'm not trying to attack anyone's, way of eating. What I'm saying is it's very different than the way that I was raised with cleaner foods, at least the way my family ate in Mexico. And you can clearly see the difference in lifestyle family being more active and thinner in Mexico as opposed to the American raised family members. And it's all because we sort of, again, you get used to this lifestyle of going to restaurants and eating out. And, I've said in the past that when we were younger, our parents cooked a lot at home because we couldn't afford to eat at restaurants. And now it's become the common thing that most people eat out. But we know that the foods that are in the restaurants are rich for a reason. They're designed to be to have extra fat and extra cheese and everything else so that we can, become addicted to these foods. So that's not necessarily the way that we eat at home. And so, as became plant-based and I started sampling all the different recipes that were being recommended, I realized that I still gravitated towards the flavors that I grew up with. And so I still like salsa, I still like beans and other things like that. But really, what it is the more I got involved with doing the research, the more that I realized that the foods that I still enjoy are some of the most original foods that our cultures sort of had, like the corn, the nopales, which is the cactus, Jamaica, the hibiscus tea. We found out that culturally, both of our cultures really like things like pomegranate seeds. And people have asked us before, how do you eat pomegranate? And so I find that interesting. I'm going to have to do a demo on how you peel a pomegranate fruit and what do you do with the seeds. And so we both have stories of growing up as children. And, in Mexico, you can, at least back in the day, have a cup of pomegranate seeds to snack on that you buy at a park or, somewhere, and you're just enjoying that. The hibiscus tea that we know is very healthy for us was a common drink before people started adding so much sugar and diluting that and taking it away from being as healthy. And so um, the goal, and there are plenty of recipe books that you can find now with Mexican foods that are original foods that come from the indigenous people, I guess if you want to say it that way, that are still healthy for us, but don't have to have all the added animal-based products and fats and sugars and salts, and can still be rich because the secret is found, as we all know, in the actual seasoning of the food and in the dressings. But I think I introduced Riz to nopales, cactus.
Hmm.
And it's one of my favorites. I can eat that all the time. But I've always enjoyed, say, corn tortillas as opposed to flour tortillas. And the things that now I know, being in, as a whole food plant-based person, now I understand the healthier versions are what I've always enjoyed. It's just that we lose sight. It could be marketing, advertising, whatever, that there's always a new reinvention of a food to make it more appealing to the masses. And I think that's where our food gets lost. Like putting a taco in a taco on top of it. It's just such a variety of combinations that are made now. But there are several books that I recommend that are right in my bookcase right there, but plenty of books that will teach you how to get back to your original foods. And I would say that even in Riz's diet, I've noticed the same things. We have so many things that are very common to our diet, which was the reason why it was easier for us to adopt this way of living. We both enjoy lentils, we both enjoy the potatoes and the rice and
Garbanzos and
garbanzos
yeah.
and beans. And
I got a couple of comments on the colonialization of ethnic foods. In talking to my mom came from immigrated from Pakistan, and when discussing the food that she makes here or made here as I was growing up, as compared to the foods that she made there or was exposed to there, they were similar, except in the concept that over here, much more meat was added to the food, and so they were the same dishes, other than I guess, as westernizing the diet with the more affluent diet was adding a lot more meat to the dishes. And talking about introducing, we both have our ethnic backgrounds, and I got to introduce Maya to lots of different spices like turmeric and coriander and things like that, which are just staples of our diet. So we aren't just dependent on salt, which we all know is not very good for us. The other thing about colonialization, which I've thought was very interesting and I've looked into recently, is we always talk about the blue zones, and one in particular is Okinawa. And Okinawa, we look at how people are living longer and healthier, and they had the plant slant diet. But post World War II, as the United States, quote, invaded Okinawa and westernized that island nation, that whole concept of it becoming a blue zone is being destroyed because they are now exposed to the same foods that we have here in the United States, and I think we're seeing a change in their health status, which I find very interesting.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
I guess,
it's
oh,
interesting that when those cultures that usually have low risks of so many of the chronic diseases we talk about, they wind up incorporating these eating habits from, affluent nations, as you say, and then start developing the same pandemics that are found in these colonial invaders. And it's kind of intriguing. And the idea, when we talk about removing salt and some of these things, people immediately think, of deprivation and things are not going to taste good. But you brought up a great point, because the widespread use of herbs and spices and things of this nature, which have such remarkable nutritional value, is the way that you add back some of that, that umami, that savoriness
mm,
and so on, without adding the devastation of high fat, high oil, sugar, salt, and all of that. So yeah, it's very important. The point you made is very, very important.
there's something else that Riz always says if we happen to watch a video where someone's tasting a certain food that's fried, it's like, yes, anything that you fry is going to taste delicious to you because of the fat in it. But I guess in general, the gist of it all is to understand that most of the food that we find in restaurants is heavily processed, and we know that that's not good for us. And it really takes us away from the original foods, from the food as it is in its closest, natural state, and we're destroying the nutrients along the way. So, the goal is to move people away from the processed foods, minimize how much you do to it, and just cook it at home. It's so much easier. I, recently said to Riz, I just don't enjoy eating out. Even if I try to find a cleaner version, I prefer my food.
Yeah.
Just you can tell the difference in the flavors.
I'm here with Maya Acosta and Dr. Riz Bukhari. Let people know how they can find you, where they would go to follow you and to see your podcast, Maya, and all the things that you guys are doing.
Yeah. Well, thank you. So we've had in the past two different names, but we're just now kind of moving more towards just healthy lifestyle solutions.org. That's our website, healthylifestylesolutions.org. And, we've had a name here in the Dallas area for our local group, but I think we're going to rebrand and just keep everything under one because we promote lifestyle medicine as well. So we
Right.
encourage nutrition and lifestyle medicine.
Yeah, that's great. Maya, you brought up a point about simplifying the meals at home and using a lot of these indigenous products that are common across many of these ethnic and indigenous cultures, whether it's whole grains, whether it's certain vegetables and plants. With Mexico, you got cacti, and you got, mole, and you got tamale, corn, you got all these beautiful things that are done. You do a nice thing on helping people strategize home food prep. Can you talk about that just a little? Maybe both of you could address that.
Yes, just a little bit in terms of giving tips, especially now on my podcast. I have a Thursday episode where I just give short tips, and you would think it's just common information, but you just never know. I think of the podcast as a way, it's like a classroom for me in the sense that I'm able to help educate people wherever they are to get started. So I create content in terms of teaching people the basic stuff, staples, how to transition to incorporating more whole foods into your diet. The grocery store, how to navigate the grocery store. Where do you start? What areas do you avoid? What to have in terms of keeping things in your pantry. When we've had certain situations that keep us from going to the grocery store, like the recent freeze that we had, we were not hungry. I had plenty of food. I'm always prepared. So we talk about having, if you have to buy your beans, buying them in, BPA free can with low sodium, always emphasizing low sodium. So we talk about that. And then, how to really prep your kitchen so that it's a fully functioning kitchen. You know where all your staples are, you know where your seasonings are, your herbs and all of that. So the goal is to just help people become comfortable in the kitchen. And even I don't teach cutting like knife strategies, but I like to promote gadgets because that's what makes cooking for me a lot of fun. Is I like being in the kitchen and enjoying the whole process. Really, it's like Zen.
So
I think
you demo on your podcast, you demo food prep, that kind of thing?
Not on the podcast. I talk about the things and then I provide like PDF files that people can download so that if, for example, when I talk about what ingredients to buy, organic or inorganic, or what the daily dozen looks like, or just what staples to have, I have downloadable content that people can take with them to the grocery store. But I do enjoy doing short videos from time to time, like for my Instagram reels, I put them as shorts on YouTube, or sometimes I do food videos. Like in the past, I was doing this live collaborative experience with, say, one of my former guests who would come on and cook with me live. And that was a lot of fun. So we would cook the same meal and it's fun to see how people use different techniques in the kitchen. So it makes it fun.
Riz, do you and Maya do things together in the education of your patients? Is that something that you do together?
Originally it started where Maya was the health and wellness coordinator for my clinic,
I see.
so that's where our kind of our collaboration started. Then as we grew bigger and we started Plant-Based DFW, she got outside of the clinic, and we were working more on our outreach, where we were doing potlucks, guest speakers, and other events. That was when we had decided to take this beyond just my patients and try to go into the community and teach more. I felt like we got the resources in my clinic where me and my staff could teach our patients, and then we started to do the other stuff where I was hoping and we were hoping to educate the community, to get them to the point where they don't ever become a patient of mine.
Mhm. What we do in the clinic is provide the content that's available by the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. So these booklets that we can bring in and posters that we can have in the clinic, we do have all of that available so that at least every patient has that exposure. And then what Riz is talking about is our collaboration when we were partnering with a local library to have these adult education opportunities. And it was a nice way of providing information for the community. We are part of Plant Pure Communities, so we are a pod, and that's what we would do. And now we mainly walk with our community as well, since Riz is part of Walk with the Doc. So.
Was that
Yep.
also part of that women's health interest group, Maya, that I saw somehow in your bio that you were involved in?
So that's part of the American College of Lifestyle Medicine.
Okay.
I've become, it's interesting because I was never really interested in medicine, but as you know, Dr. Sabatino, this is a way that we help people heal. And I become just very passionate as we learned about the Blue Zones, then we learned about the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, and we got very involved. Riz became board certified so that we could teach patients in the community that way. And then I wanted to get involved in a physician that really cares for me. And she said, you can get involved in the women's group. And I had no idea how I was going to help if I'm not a dietitian or a doctor or any, a health provider. However, it dawned on me that I could help highlight some of these individuals on the podcast. Some of these individuals that have spent so much of their time educating themselves to support people. And so I'm very involved in the women's health interest group for ACLM. And that's kind of what has also helped shape my podcast because while lifestyle medicine is the main topic, I've become more passionate about helping to educate women in general. And so talking about everything from endometriosis to PCOS to talking about a healthy pregnancy and now menopause, I think is the way that we can support women, because we know that if we can support women and educate them on all these lifestyle pillars, they can take that information to their homes and to educate family and friends. And so and also there's that component too that I feel that sometimes women, we in general don't self-care the way that we should, and we need that support. And so I just have these wonderful providers that I've met through the College of Lifestyle Medicine that I just really want on the podcast. And it's like my ikigai now. It's like my reason for waking up every morning.
I know one of your missions that Riz, you've talking about, and I'm sure it's Maya's too, was to kind of grow and elevate the plant-based community of Dallas. Has that been happening? Have you seen real nice changes with that?
Yeah, it's I guess the way I see it is that there wasn't really a unified plant-based community going back 5 or 6 years ago, and when we started doing the work we did, you started to see people come out of the woodwork. So it's that the people were there, but the people were just kind of living their individual lives and doing their thing, and so it's been a kind of a satisfying thing to now have the opportunity for a sense of community to occur. And so there is a community that exists. I will say that I think that the COVID pandemic did probably not probably it definitely had an impact on our ability to get together and have a sense of community. But now that we're kind of coming out on the other end of it, we're starting to resume some of our activities and getting back together. There's definitely a group of people here, and one thing that I'm really quite proud of is that we're also part of the vegan community, and one thing I've noticed is that the vegan community has become quite interested in their health, in whole food plant based nutrition, and so there's some crossover in both communities as well.
And as a physician, let me address two other missions that you spoke about because I'm curious to see how that's evolving for you. One was to actually turn on other medical physicians and practitioners to this way of thinking and living, and also then to reach out and reach the students in medical education. So, how have you been doing that? How have you done that? And how has that progressed for you?
Well, we've been the with the other physicians. I've tried to just kind of live as an example, and then share the information when I can, and then just whenever we hear about somebody who's interested, we make contact with them and provide them the resources and try to include them in the community so that they can learn more.
And how do
Uh,
you reach the students?
so the students, very specifically, we've been very fortunate to have been invited to medical schools. We focus obviously in our local community. I've been able to lecture at my alma mater, UT Southwestern. I've also been down to Houston and Galveston to speak with the interest groups down there. And my thoughts on that are there's people like you and me who are a little bit older, and we kind of converted well after our education time. It was something caused us to latch onto it and make a change, but it wasn't the education that we got during our medical training. And so what I'm really hoping for is that this type of training about lifestyle and whole food nutrition, whole food plant-based nutrition, becomes a part of the training for our medical students. And if that's the case, we're going to have a whole new generation of physicians who think differently than the current generation of physicians.
Right.
And I think that's very encouraging. It's encouraging information, and I see that there is a significant interest amongst our younger doctors in training, resident physicians, and I think that just bodes well for the community, that we'll have physicians who are well educated in nutrition, which wasn't the case in before. I can tell you, I had zero
Right.
education in nutrition. And if you ask 10 doctors at my point in life about their opinion on nutrition, you're going to get 10 different opinions, and very little of it is evidence based or data based. So I like the idea that the younger guys and girls are getting exposed to it, and can bring us bring it forward into the future for the health of our nation.
Yeah. And if I can also add that in many ways prior to the pandemic, I feel like Riz and I had spread ourselves very thin. We were going everywhere. Wherever he was invited, we were there. And it almost felt, I remember saying at one time, we should try doing this by Zoom before the pandemic, because I was using Zoom to interview. So it's interesting that the pandemic has taught us new ways of achieving our goals so that we don't have to fly everywhere or drive everywhere. And I remember there was one medical school from the UK that asked Riz to address the group, the medical students. And so those are opportunities to connect without having to leave the comfort of our own home. And
Right.
also, I was really amazed at the recent lifestyle medicine conference in Orlando. I was really surprised to see young medical students that are already on board. And so and that's very encouraging to know that they're interested at early in their career in speaking to their patients about nutrition and also just lifestyle medicine overall. So I think that we're our momentum is returning. I was saying to Riz, I think this pandemic it took 3 years rather than the two or so for people to just be interested once again. And so I think there are great opportunities
Yeah, the
to
NHA,
brainstorm how to outreach them.
at the NHA conference, it's kind of interesting because there are benefactors, and the association itself has scholarships that they provide for medical students who are actively in med schools to attend this conference. So they can
Mhm.
actually be in front of these physicians who have been teaching this over, some of them for decades of their lives. Riz, I was going to ask you, are you familiar with Dr. Clapper's initiative on moving medicine forward? And have you ever thought about
Yep.
collaborating on that initiative of educating the medical school students?
Oh, absolutely. We actually are involved with him. We work with
Okay,
him on that, and we had several things lined up for him, and then the pandemic hit,
right.
and so we did actually have to cancel about 4 or 5 med school appearances that we had set up for him. But yeah, no, we're strong supporters of Dr. Clapper and his initiative to educate medical students.
Well, that's
I think
fantastic. As
I
we
think it's
wind down, I want to ask each of you, do you have any, final words you'd like to share with the audience out here? Maya, why don't you go first?
oh well, I'm very excited about life right now. I'm thankful that at this age I came upon this information. I learned about the power of nutrition and lifestyle medicine. And I just, many of us, like myself, maybe the only person in my family who has made this decision. But I always want to encourage those people that are like in my shoes that are on their own. They don't have the family support. I just want to encourage you to do what is best for you so that you can have quality of life and you can minimize your risk for developing chronic disease. Because if there's anything that I have learned, by being married to a surgeon, a
A
vascular
vascular surgeon,
surgeon,
yeah.
is the suffering that people endure. And I hate to say it this way, but it's really what they did to themselves. And I think that's the part of the education that is so important for me to emphasize is that many chronic diseases can be prevented through really diet. That's the biggest one is the biggest piece of the puzzle is the plant-based nutrition, whole foods. And so you don't have, some people when we're younger, we don't seem to care about the choices we make. We say, okay, well, if it shortens my life, it's okay. But it's not that easy. It's not that simple. You spend the last 10 to 15 years of your life losing quality of life, losing mobility, losing your ability to live a fulfilling life. And so I just want to encourage people if you're on your own, living this way of life, give yourself a pat on the back for making this choice. And there is support like the NHA and a lot of the groups that are here for you, so you don't have to be alone. You can find your own community.
She stole everything I had to say.
She stole your thunder, Doc.
Yeah, I mean that's she just stole. Those are the exact lines that I've used before. No, no. You know what's interesting is that learning this way of life reinvigorated my spirit as a healer. Sometimes we forget what or we need reminders. We kind of get into a rut and we forget what we got into this for. And it reminded me that I became a doctor to help people live better lives. And so learning that there's a way to prevent disease was just mind blowing to me. But at the same time, just invigorating to me. And so it became very important to me to help people understand that you don't have to do exactly what Maya said, which is you don't have to spend the end of your life with poor quality. You don't have to spend the last few years of your life being busy dying. So I like the idea that we do have some control. And that's what we're trying to teach people. You have control over your health, and by making certain healthy lifestyle choices, you can change the trajectory of your life.
I can't thank you both enough for coming on, sharing this time, your hearts, your information with the audience. And I encourage everybody out there to follow Maya Acosta, Dr. Riz Bukhari, and take advantage of their wonderful information and the ways they are really reaching out to improve this vegan education throughout the world, and take advantage of a Healthy Living Solution podcast with Maya. And I want to thank the audience for being with us today. Without you, I couldn't do what I do. We couldn't do this. And I thank you for being part of this active, healthy community. I'm your host, Dr. Frank Sabatino, and on behalf of the National Health Association, I thank you, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode of the Health Science Podcast. You've been listening to the Health Science Podcast, brought to you by the National Health Association. Thank you for joining us today and for your commitment to evidence-based health science that backs a whole food, plant-exclusive lifestyle and contributes to the well-being of all people, animals, and our environment. I'm your host, Dr. Frank Sabatino. Be sure to leave a rating and a review, and we'll see you on the next show.